Okay, I think the numbers have leveled off, so we'll get started. Welcome to this morning's session on Leadership Lounge, episode 2. This one is themed on leadership mindsets. So this one is all about kind of how do you maintain that leadership mindset, particularly now as we're going through this situation, but also going forward as well. I'm just going to share my screen with you. So we can go through just a recap of the sessions and what's coming up and what we're going to get involved into today. So Leadership Lounge is obviously a series, it's a web series. We host it every Monday morning at 9:30, and it's for just our people managers, so anyone that leads teams within the business. So it's a private members club, if you like, for all of our people managers. So this session we decided to go through leadership mindsets. Last week we looked at how to keep your employees emotionally healthy. So we had a great panel discussion on kind of how to look after their well-being and how to make sure that they're doing good, they're doing okay. Today, what we want to start talking about is you as leaders. So how do you as a leader keep that kind of leadership mindset? How do you continuously grow and learn and always push yourself forward? And then our other episodes throughout the series include how to kind of drive productivity from afar. So next week we have Hina, Steve and Bev, who are going to talk about how they're managing big departments and big teams to keep driving productivity, because they're very kind of driven by numbers and results. Then we'll look at collaboration, so how to keep your remote team in sync. And then we're going to finish up the month looking at how to set vision, objectives and KPIs, which times in really nicely for our Super Pay launch as well. So today's panelists, let me just introduce you to them. We have Hugo, George and Bruno joining us today. So I'm just going to hand over to them quickly to give you an update and a bit of an introduction as to who they are and what they do. So handing over to Hugo first. Hugo, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, hi, morning guys. Yes, I work with most of you on a daily basis, so I'm keeping it short. I'm head of channel marketing, so I manage a team of 3 people dedicated to support our field sellers, our partners and our inbound teams. So everything related with sales. I have 15 years experience managing teams. And I have pretty much almost 20 years working experience across multiple sectors, from early startup environments to multinational big corporations like IBM. So I've managed people, teams of 0 in a startup environment up to teams of 30, 35 when I worked back in the day in the publishing industry. And that's it.
Thank you, Hugo. Okay, hand it over to George.
Hi, I'm Head of Operational Strategy and Change. That's a proper mouthful, sorry about that. I've been at Payment Sense since the start of March, so I still consider myself a newbie here. Probably others don't, but I do. Before March, I worked at OVO Energy, and I've been there for 6.5 years. Ran a similar team there called CHIMPS, which stood for Change and Improvement. And prior to that, I was at Lloyds Bank for 16 years. I worked in 10 different teams there. So I've been in management for about 20 years of my career as well. My role here is to protect the customer and colleague experience. I do this by talking to all the teams around Payment Sense who are making changes, trying to understand how they would impact the customer and therefore the work that the operational team need to do. So we can try and mitigate the impact either by changing what we do or changing the customer relationship. And then try and control that implementation so that everyone understands what's happening, why it's happening, and how it impacts them, and then also look for ways to improve what we do in customer services and operations. That's kind of me.
Amazing, thank you. And Bruno, do you want to take us through you?
Yeah, hi everyone, good morning. So I joined Payment Sense 2019, so we'll be like, in a month will be 1 year that I'm working here. I joined as Director of Sales Operations. So basically what I do, I work very close to Steve Jason, especially Steve Jason, Steve Cummings and Hina, to look into the performance, profitability, and the growth of the entire sales organization. My main expertise is in BI, business intelligence, and sales operations. So I have more or less 10 years experience in those two areas, always managing different teams. As you probably know, I moved to UK 4 years ago. Before that, I was in Singapore. I worked for Singapore, Hong Kong, and Malaysia, managing, again, like different teams, always focused on BI and sales ops. When I moved to UK, I was managing 20 people here in a different company, always focused on e-commerce and technology companies. And back in Brazil, where I'm from, I used to run different teams in South America. So also managing people in Chile, Argentina, and in Brazil. Yeah, that's basically my short story.
Amazing. Thank you, Bruno. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. Okay, so leadership mindsets. What is it that we need to think about? Well, first of all, I wanted to ask a question to you, the audience, and see what you think on this. But if you're thinking about a leader that you would like to follow and the kind of values and the things that they stand for, I've put two. I've categorized them, leader A or leader B. So I want you to just in the chat box for me, write which leader you'd rather follow. So someone who sees challenges and fears as something to avoid or an opportunity to learn and grow. Someone who sees disagreement as a threat or necessary for learning. Someone who sees risk as something to avoid or necessary for obtaining rewards, or someone who sees underperforming employee as someone who is expendable or someone to learn from or someone who needs support. So which one would you rather follow, leader A or leader B? Just pop it into the chat box for me. Alex, B with an exclamation mark. Yeah, as I thought, leader B, absolutely. Yeah, I've done this a few times and it's always leader B that comes out. Of course you want to follow leader B. Leader B is someone who's aspirational, who's someone who takes risks, who helps their team, who supports people with growth. But often actually what we see is it's leader A that a lot of people end up getting. And as leaders, we have to be conscious of that, and we have to think about what kind of leader do we want to be and how do we actually do that? What values do we stand for? And a lot of the time, leaders actually forget that they've got two parts to their job. So often they think it's very much about the task focus and getting the job done and making sure they get all the projects and the initiatives and everything out there. But actually what we have to strike the balance with is the task focus versus the people focus. So leaders don't get there on their own, they get there by leading a team. And in order to do that, you have to be a good people person. You have to be able to kind of have that people focus and help them. And there's a really interesting book called Scaling Leadership, which talks about the different traits and the different things that you need to have to be an effective leader. And the number one differentiator they kind of concluded was, for an effective leader, you have to have really strong people skills. And that's what we're going to explore more today. We're going to talk about those people skills and how our panelists kind of do that. So feel free throughout the session, if you want to pop a question to the panel, just pop it in the chat box and we'll include that as well. And then also one of the things that we need to consider as well, and particularly now, which is really crucial for us as we change the business and we pivot to something brand new, is the number one rated trait that people wanted from their leaders was vision. So it wasn't about having pay rises and having the best projects. Don't get me wrong, that comes into it to an extent. But the number one thing they wanted from their leaders was vision and purpose, really. So being able to actually have kind of a guiding light as to where they were going and what they needed to do. And so that's what we're going to kind of focus on today. So how do our panelists really keep that people focus and how do they drive vision and direction for their teams? So we're going to switch over to the panel discussion now. We're going to, I've got a few questions already and a few topics that we're going to talk through, but then we're going to hand over to you guys to ask any questions as well live. So bear with me. Sorry, my computer's decided to log itself out of the questions, so I'm just going to log back in. Great, that's logging in now. Okay, so let's open this discussion up then. So just handing over to, let's start with George actually. So George, you've been in leadership for a long time, as you said, you've got years and years worth of experience. But can you take us back to a time when you first started managing people, so your first like early days of people management, and what your first big leadership lesson was? What was the first big thing that you learned?
Okay. Made me sound very old there. So my first lesson was probably learning to play to people's strengths. So not overly focusing on people's weaknesses. I learned it from, I had a girl in my team who I was trying to get her to learn how to do data analysis, and I'd leave her to do it, and I'd come back and she'd just tied herself up in knots and going down rabbit holes and drawing no conclusions, just getting more and more data. And I thought maybe somebody else would be able to do a better job with trying to get the idea across to her. So I paired her up with someone else in the team, and I came back after a couple of days to look at what they'd produced, and they'd done an amazing job, like the pair of them together. And it struck me after I'd spoken to them more in detail about how they got around it, is that you'd not really trained her how to do data analysis, but she had worked really well with him to kind of ask the questions for him to do the analysis, and then the pack that they produced at the end of it was just amazing, and they'd come up with loads of conclusions that I know that neither of them would have been able to do on their own. So it started making me think that actually her strengths were not in the data side of things, but more in the drawing conclusions and getting the answers out of somebody else, and his were much more in the data side of things. So it's like that strength in a team rather than in individuals themselves. Also, people enjoy doing things that they're good at more than they enjoy doing, like spending time working on things that they're not so good at. I'm not saying that people shouldn't try and improve their weaknesses, but you get a lot more out of people if you can give them a role that plays to their strengths. And there's actually a series of books that on this subject that I found later on called Strengths Finder, something that people can have a look at. You can do like a analysis of yourself and figure out what your strengths are, and it works really well in a team of people because you can then work out who has the opposite strength to you, and you can work really closely with them.
I think you're right there, identifying quite early on strengths and weaknesses and how you can kind of nurture that for where you need to nurture it, but then also play to the strengths and utilize those as well. I think that's a great point. Good. Okay, so same question over to Bruno then.
Yeah, I agree with George. I think like you always have to start focusing on the strengths for sure. On top of that, so like one of my first working experience was very weird because basically I was hired by someone. I was like 22 years old. I was hired by someone that left the company before I joined. I had to build a team of 15 people, and I had no idea how to do it. So I think what I learned from that is that you have to understand that people are very different, but people always want to grow, and people want to have like space for growth. I think like once you start understanding what are the strengths of someone, and you give them the vision that you want them to achieve, and you work together that vision, and you give them the space and the tools, and you allow them to do their best work, always coaching, of course, then you start seeing those people that really have the potential for growth, like shining. Yeah, I think like, so if you mix like focusing on the strengths, but also giving the right vision and giving the space for growth, that's when things start working very, very well. And you always have to make sure that you, like, at least that's how I used to do in the beginning of my career, was to make sure that I was like catching up with the things that I didn't know as well. And every time I was having a conversation with someone and I felt that, oh, I'm not very strong on giving this type of coaching or leadership conversation, then I was going and learn about it. I was going and look like on YouTube or like read books about it. And then the next week or like a month later, I was so much better. I was able to handle that conversation. I was able to see the people that was reporting to me also growing together and realizing that, yeah, you are getting better. I'm getting better. We are part of a team and everything works pretty well.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think you talk about kind of two crucial points there. So the first one being, don't tell them what to do, but not how to do it is kind of crucial, isn't it? And leadership. And then secondly, around kind of having a growth mindset. So always as a leader, still wanting to learn and wanting to kind of absorb as much information as possible as well, and encouraging your teams to do that too.
Definitely.
Good. All right. So, and over to Hugo as well. Have you got anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with everything that George and Bruno said. There are two things that I always look at. The first is to work with people who think differently, people who have different view, a different point of view. I don't like to work with people that are yes man or yes woman. For that I have myself, right? I need someone to question me, to move me, to push me into a different direction, and to question, is this the right decision? So when you have a team that thinks differently, and at the same time there are two skill sets, they are better than you in the stuff that you are not good at, and you're not afraid of hiring people that are better than you in some work streams. There will be less experience, more experience, it doesn't matter, right? That's depending on the role, but they need to have stuff that you need to be confident that they will be better than you, and you coach and you improve and you help them grow that side. Because if you hire people and you work with people that are better than you, your team as a whole will be better and perform better, and the company will perform better. So the think differently and the allow people to grow into the areas and not be afraid of that are two main things that I always look at.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I suppose that plays that kind of leader A, leader B piece as well, around having people that challenge you and not being afraid of it. A lot of the time, I think people can be really scared to have people in their team challenge them. They want just kind of a placid team or placid people
Yes.
around them that just agree with what they say. But you're right. In order for you to kind of get the best out of it, you need to have that comfortableness, I suppose, with challenging.
Yeah.
So I suppose that leads quite nicely into my next question then, and I'll start with you, Hugo, but around sort of values then to you as a leader. So you said being able to have people around you that challenge you, but is there any kind of non-negotiable values that you take with every team that you manage, wherever it is? Is there things that you really value?
For sure. One is accountability, right? As a leader, you are accountable for whatever they deliver. That needs to be the fact. You cannot protect yourself as, oh, that wasn't me, that was A or B. If they work with you, if they work under your leadership, and you expect them to go into and to buy your vision and to work with you in a constructive way, you need to be accountable. So you're the responsible for every single decision in the team. Even if you give autonomy and that people fails, you're failing. If you give autonomy and that people succeeds, you are succeeding as well. So it's being accountable. And the second one is integrity. That's non-negotiable, right? You need to assume every mistake you make. You need to be straightforward and be honest. Honesty is something that is someone that works with you, if they don't trust you, you're not getting anything good from them. So you need to be honest and you need to be accountable. Those are the two main traits that I always try to put in front of myself when I'm looking at a task or working with people.
Yeah, honesty is such a hard one though, isn't it, sometimes? And like you said, that integrity piece and being able to own it and yeah, take responsibility for anything that happens, including the failures as well. And we're going to talk about failures later on in the session as well. So yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of draw on that a bit more. Okay, so Bruno, have you got anything to add to that at all?
Yeah, I was thinking about integrity as well, but I think respect is a big one for me. I had experience in the past where I was working with someone that was not very respectful with me and the team. And I always felt that this is like, you know, when you start working and then like you don't know much about how business works and you just think, oh, it's a lot of people working with different skills, but at some point everything comes together and you are part of that and you feel you're part of that, but then you see someone is not respecting people or is not treating with compassion, is not there are some people that sometimes don't want to know what is happening to the person, why the person is not delivering what it's supposed to deliver because there are other things happening. So I always thought that I will be that guy that wants to know what is going on. I want to bring compassion to the table. I want to make sure that I know how you feel and why you are performing or why you're not performing, because there are like so many other things that you cannot control sometimes, but you have to be that leader that knows what's going on. Also on the passion side of things, and be very respectful with people. I think that's important. And proactivity is a big one for me as well, because I always focus on being very proactive myself. And I always like to work with people that are very proactive too, because otherwise you cannot, like, nowadays you cannot like spend time doing everything by yourself. You have to rely on people doing things. So you give them accountability, but you also expect them to be very proactive when they find something that they can solve by themselves, or they can come to you with some proposed solutions instead of just coming with a problem.
Yeah, I think that's key, isn't it? And that kind of goes back to your first point on your first question around kind of always growing and learning and adapting as well. So when you always think in the mindset of I need a solution, not just the problem, then it kind of helps perpetuate that a bit more, which is good. Okay, George, what are your non-negotiables?
I really would echo just what Bruno and Hugo said. My non-negotiable is honesty. I'm a bit of a straight-talking northerner, so you'll get nothing but honesty from me, really. And I expect everybody else to be that honest with me as well. And I suppose the only thing I would say there is that it can be hard to be honest, as you said, and it can be hard to hear the truth sometimes. But so I suppose patience goes along with that, and some kind of self-reflection is important to hear the truth and be able to see that in yourself and do something about it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, echoing what you've all said, honesty is huge. So just another question really on that, George. How do you kind of, especially now at the moment with what we're going through, and there's so much uncertainty, and you in particular have a huge team that you look after, a huge remit where you've had furloughs, you've had people lose their job, you've had people obviously staying in work but doing a lot more within their roles as well and expanding remits. How are you keeping that honesty? Like, how are you making sure that you kind of live by that value with those people?
Communication. There's just we're trying our best to communicate the reason behind the decisions, the need for the change in focus, lots of just kind of reality explanations. So this is why we're having to pivot our focus. Things are changing day by day. Like the government are giving us different guidelines. We're seeing different things happening in our business. So it's really just a lot of communication and clear explanations as to why and how we've come to the conclusions and the decisions and that we've actually made. So yeah, regular communication.
Yeah, and I think also we have to be okay with saying I don't know as well. Like, I think, I don't know, I'm experiencing it with my team. I find that sometimes I have to go, I just don't know. I just can't give you an answer for that, but I'll find out and I'll come back to you.
Yeah, and sometimes you can't even find out as well. Sometimes you're just having to say, I really don't know. We have to be okay with that uncertainty right now. So you haven't always got an answer, and it's okay to not always have an answer.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, good. So just moving back to you, Bruno, obviously your role here in Payment Sense is slightly different in that you don't manage people, but what you lead on is strategic projects, like you said. So you work a lot on strategy and you have key stakeholders in the business that you work with, and you lead projects where you have to maybe kind of use people from different areas of the business and different teams. So how do you kind of ensure that the team that you're working on delivers and that you get the buy-in that you need in order to kind of lead people forwards?
Yeah. What I usually try to find in the beginning is like you always have people that are willing to help you and people that are not, people that are more comfortable in doing like things how they do. And I think like one crucial part of my role is to change how we operate, and try to get like more engagement from people and work together to produce something that is better than what we have today. So I think the first main piece is to explain to people why we need to change that. So trying to identify where are like the big levers of a change is very, very important, but explaining to people why we need to do that and showing that that change is going to be important for the business, it's going to be important for that person, it's going to be important for that specific team. And also trying to translate that into how this is going to impact that person specifically. So after we deliver a project, what is the result that we expected from this project? Once you get all the engagement that you need and you explain people and they really understand, okay, this is going to be impactful, so yeah, I'm going to support you. Then it goes back to what Hugo was saying, is like making sure that you are holding people accountable. You are detailing the next steps and the phases and everything that needs to be delivered. So that's what I do in my day-to-day, is try to understand where are those pieces of the puzzle and what people needs to deliver the whole puzzle and put the whole thing together. Being very clear on expectations. One thing that I realized is that I used to have many issues before, like years ago, where everything was only verbal. So now I try to put like everything like documented in an email, in a Slack, whatever it is. But these are the next steps. This is what I expect you to deliver from the project, and this is the ETA. So I expect to have something by that day, and I'm also committing myself to do this, and that by that day. And I think once you do that, and people start seeing that you're working hard, you're delivering by the date and with the quality that that you promise to deliver, then you kind of throw the ball to that person, and that person will have to do the same thing. So I think that's the main thing, is understanding what needs to be changed, what needs to be implemented, explaining to people, holding people accountable, having like expectations very, very clear, make sure everyone understands what needs to be delivered. And then also like, I think one piece that a lot of people forget, but it's very important, is to give the exposure to the people that worked on the project. So I try to do that very often and say, okay, this was not done by me, this was done by someone else, or bring that person to actually present that piece or present the whole thing together with me, because this also helps to leverage motivation for next projects and starts creating some engagement that makes so much easier to work on different projects going forward.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right. Taking that time out to acknowledge someone's work can make a huge difference to the way they interact with you as well, if you can kind of give them that platform above them.
Definitely.
Good. Okay. And you kind of echo some of the things that George was saying there around clear communication. That seems to be kind of a big theme that's coming through from this. Obviously, a couple of weeks ago, George and Jan did a town hall, and they talked about how we have to accelerate into the turn, and how now's the time for us to kind of pivot and change and really push forward quite quickly. So Hugo, you kind of lead your own team, but then you kind of work very closely with a lot of other teams as well. So how are you doing this at the moment with your team and with the workload that you have, and how are you kind of prioritizing tasks and making sure you're accelerating into that turn at the moment?
Yes, working in the marketing team and the wider marketing team, my particular sub-team works with sellers, but we work within the wider marketing team looking ahead, right? So at the same time that our product team and tech team are developing the product, we are looking into the future. How do we launch that product? And one example was what Guy presented last week or the week before around the new brand. So we are always working ahead of time. And even if we are doing business as usual and with the current product, we are already working on the next big thing. What the moment, for example, we are working on, how do we launch SuperPay with Payment Sense brand, with a campaign that we are launching hopefully in the beginning of June. But at the same time, we're working 3 months ahead. What is going to be Dojo brand and the new offering? And that's very hard when you have a reduced team. We have my team, I have just one team member now out of 3, and then the wider marketing team, they are also mostly furloughed. So it's very tough to think ahead and try to plan ahead with a lack of resources, but that gives us strength. And at the same time, you can leverage that lack of resources to give more responsibility to other people, and those people will see it as an opportunity for them to shine and to deliver results. So if you can be smart and take your role and take a step back, and we have to do everything, right? I have to do everything in my team. It's not a people manager. I have to do an email, or I have to write copy, or even do a bit of design if I have to do a flyer. That's not the point, and that takes a bit of time to think ahead and plan and have the strategic decision making. But the moment we are living, right? But then you can delegate more tasks to other people, and if they are good as they should be, they would take that responsibility to shine and to evolve their roles as well. So what I tried to do in particular, when one team member that started as you, George, in the beginning of March, is to give her the most we can. And some stuff is really difficult, right? Because they're working remotely, they don't know the stakeholders, they don't know the processes, they don't know the systems. It's very tough, but by the end of this accelerated learning curve, in the end of this current environment, there will be better professionals, and then we can make up all the things we didn't do on a strategic view and on a more pragmatic day-to-day work.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think it is, like you say, an opportunity really for growth and for people to kind of pick up on the things that they wouldn't normally do and learn from it as well. And I think that's really a great vision to be setting for teams as well, isn't it? For people who may be feeling, oh, I've got a lot of work to take on. Well, actually, this is a really good opportunity for you to learn something new. Good. So, George, going over to you then. Same question. Obviously, you're coming in at a different angle where you were kind of brand new and you've kind of been thrown into the curve straight away. How are you managing to keep on top of that, and how are you managing to kind of prioritize that workload and not get kind of bogged down with the day-to-day tasks within your department?
Yeah, it's quite tough when you don't know anything and you're just asking for information from lots of other people. I play the I'm new here card quite a lot. So at the start, we kind of really reprioritized everything that was SuperPay and kind of parked it and focused very much on DD cancellations and stuff that would have a real positive revenue impact and help our customers through the situation, but also help us through the situation. And I knew nothing about this, so it was a matter of gathering people together who knew what they were doing and knew the topic, and tried to help them reprioritize their day-to-day tasks to help us on the most important thing that we felt the operation had to deal with at that time. And now more recently we've switched back onto SuperPay and we're trying to get to a point where we can train the new customer service team in Bristol. And so again, it was been gathering people together and helping them to reprioritize their current tasks that are keeping them busy to help them to focus on this with us. As somebody who hasn't got the subject matter expertise, all I can do is help do that kind of coordinating and reprioritizing and taking blockers away from them by talking to my manager and him talking to the other directors. That's the role that I've been playing in it. So it's really, yeah, we've been trying to concentrate on the main things that we think are important for the business right now and getting the right people aligned to that.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I suppose that leads beautifully onto the next part I wanted to talk about around kind of unlocking the potential. So you're right, where perhaps the subject matter expert stuff isn't quite there yet, you have a real opportunity to start looking at potential and helping people unlock that. So how do you go about doing that? How do you spot that in your team, and how do you kind of nurture that? Particularly with a brand new team as well. I mean, you've got all brand new managers and people that you don't really know and didn't have the time to kind of form those relationships with. So how are you doing that? How are you approaching that?
Yeah, I think this comes back to two other answers that I've already given, but I'll try and bring them together. So it's like looking for their strengths by communicating with people. So I try to make sure I have time with everyone on a one-to-one basis. And also in groups, seeing what it is that people actively volunteer to get involved in, because that usually gives you an indication of what they're interested in, what they're good at, and what they, therefore what they probably enjoy doing, and then picking that up with them on a one-to-one basis and try to harness that and see how we could use that enthusiasm and interest and help us go forward. I think certainly at a time where you're trying to accelerate and do things quickly, it's really important to get people working on things that they want to work on and that is their strength, rather than spending this time helping people improve things that maybe they're not as good at. They may not think they're that good at it, but if they show an interest in it, they usually are good at it. So it's kind of pushing them to take that opportunity.
Yeah, I think you're right, and helping, because sometimes I think self-awareness, people aren't aware of what their strengths are, and you do need to be, as a leader, looking out for that and telling them about it as well, and seeing, right, do you recognize you're actually really good at this, and this should be something you should focus more on.
Yes.
So taking that same question over to Bruno then, same for you then. So how do you kind of spot potential? You've already talked a bit about kind of allowing people to step up and to take that next step, but how are you spotting potential, and how are you helping people unlock that as well?
So I think it goes back to what George was saying. I think playing with strengths, but also one thing that I used to do quite often is try to understand what is the problem. So like you have an issue that you have to solve, right? Like we all have issues every day. If you put like the whole team together with that specific question and try to get like a brainstorm and different actions for that problem, you start seeing people that understands a little bit more about one piece of that problem and another piece of that problem. And then usually it ties back to their strengths as well. So you kind of like, if you have a very good session of brainstorm over a problem, 30 minutes later or 1 hour later, it's very clear who should own what, because you have that person that is more organized and want to probably document the project and create the next steps. You have that person that is more into the data, is going to deep dive into something very specific. You have that other one that is going to engage with other people and put everyone together to work and work with tech and dev to make sure everything is running. So you have these different profiles in the team. If you have a very balanced team that is going to, and they are more or less like they are respectful with each other. They are not trying to surpass each other. They are just like contributing for the team to solve the problem. After that session ends, it's very clear who should do what. So I think that's a tool that I use pretty often, and it helps for us to actually identify what are the strengths of each one, and to solve that specific issue that we want to solve.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think that comes down again to kind of really great teaming as well, doesn't it? To be able to be in a session like that and for everyone to kind of know their role and their purpose and what their strengths are as well. And we're going to explore that in a couple of episodes, actually, more around that teaming piece. Okay, so for the last part of the session, I just want to kind of start to look at, we've looked a lot at how you do this with teams and how you keep this mindset with teams. What I really want to look at now is you guys. So you as leaders, how are you keeping yourselves kind of in the right frame of mind and keep going, especially now where there's a lot of pressures. We've talked about you've lost people in your teams, you're doing more than one person's job, Hugo's gone back to doing the admin pieces, all of that kind of thing. So how do you look after yourself as well? So I'm going to put that over to Hugo actually first. So how do you keep leading, and I suppose in terms of sort of emotional vulnerability as well, how do you kind of, if you're having a bad day or a stressful day, how do you keep yourself going and keep yourself leading your teams and kind of upbeat, and I suppose, well, and if not upbeat, how do you kind of overcome that and move past it?
That's a tough question. For two reasons, right? One is because the bit of being self-aware and the emotional vulnerable side of people is not easy to accept and to identify in ourselves, right? So as managers, we need to have an extra layer of self-awareness, and we need to be prepared. And I don't feel that I'm still emotionally vulnerable, but I could be missing something at the moment, but hopefully I'm not. But we need to have that extra layer of self-awareness and be prepared, because it will happen, right? It's a fact. It happens to everyone in any particular moment in their lives. It can happen now more than ever due to the different contexts and the situation, working at home with kids, with the stress, with reduced team, the objective's still the same or even tougher. So I think it's just being self-aware and being prepared what's coming up, and be prepared to identify the symptoms as early as you can, so you can stop it from happening. You cannot just let go and continue to do stuff that you think is not making you happy at work and making you support your teams and not helping your teams to achieve what you want them to achieve, because you're not leading as a proper with a proper skill set in place. So I just need, what I would have to say is that be self-aware all the time. Question what you're doing. Was that meeting, the way you replied to someone, the way you wrote an email, the way you say, or you didn't say thank you, are you going into a route that you're just dealing with the day-to-day, or are you thinking ahead and be prepared what's coming in? Because if this lasts for 1 month, I will be emotionally fragile in the end of this. Everyone will. So we just need to be self-aware, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the self-awareness is huge. And I suppose you have that added pressure of being a parent as well. And you're not only leading a team and working on your own projects, you've also got your kids at home and you're homeschooling and managing that. How are you dealing with that, if you don't mind sharing?
No, I don't. I'm very lucky, right? In many different ways, but in this particular bit, I'm lucky. I have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. So the 7-year-old is more independent, and I give him tasks, and it's about time management, and you give responsibilities to a particular moment in time. I worked from home 1.5 years before, so I have pretty much kind of an experience in how to deal with working from home, and working from home with a small kid. When I worked, he was 1, he's now 7. So you just need to have a tight schedule, and then manage that expectation with my wife. She also works, and she has a big amount of responsibility in her work. Is try to put a calendar, and we have a common calendar, so we know when we have meetings that we need to play together, and she will go to that meeting. No, I have another important, for example, for this webinar, it's a red flag on her calendar. So at the moment, she's not doing that. So it's just time management and being open and frank, and try to bring this opportunity to also develop skill set with your kids and with you, and your ability to manage different things. These will not last. So if you take this in a positive manner, to think in 6 months, you're going to look back and say, what a strange time that was. It's just try to say this will not last, keep it happy, try to keep everything together. When you look back, you'll see something as positive. It is not positive, but it will be positive because it's a one-in-a-lifetime experience. So it's just keeping that mood up and try to do the best you can to survive this. And survive sometimes with 2 kids at home is literally survive. Other times it's just playing up. And if we make a mistake and if they come in here, it's fine. No one will die. Everyone is in the same boat. And we are all aligned that can happen.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you're right. It's about organising your time, isn't it? Knowing what's your time, what's your work time, and kind of striking that right balance for those around you. So same question to you, George, then. So in terms of kind of your vulnerabilities, and when do you know kind of now's the time to take a break, and now's the time I need to put my best foot forward as well? So how do you strike that right balance?
Yeah, it's not easy, and it's not easy, especially when there's so much going on at the moment, and there's meeting after meeting, and you can end up spending a whole day on Zoom calls back to back. And I just find that every now and again you have to be totally honest and just say, I need a break, I need to move this meeting, can we start it 10 minutes later so that I can go and get a cup of coffee and go to the toilet, something like that. I think it is, a lot of it is honesty about how tough you're finding it, like how quite often we'll get on with my team on a call, and they'll say, how's your week been, or how's your day been, and I'll be like, oh, Wednesday was a killer, so you just have to be truthful with people about how hard you're finding it, and then they can understand that you're human as well. It's okay to be like that. I also find that it's good to have somebody that you can chat to about this, maybe not just your team, outside of your team, other people within the business or your partner, whichever, that you can just say, oh, that killed me. Normally you would have somebody in work that sat next to you, maybe, that you'd be having this conversation with. So quite often punk my head in on my husband, and we have that kind of moment and then go back to it. So you just need to let steam off, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a time to vent, let it out, and then carry on. And you're right around having the opportunity to kind of say, to be open with your team, not necessarily share everything. I'm not saying be a completely open book, but to kind of, it opens up those lines, doesn't it, for them to say, actually, it's okay to be open and honest about how I'm feeling, because it's a two-way process. You can say stuff to them and they can also come to you, so then you understand what they're going through as well. And I think that's important. Okay, so over to you, Bruno. How about you?
One thing that I do quite often is try to organize my agenda so I do like 2 times a week. I do usually Monday morning and Friday afternoon, which is more like the Friday afternoon is to review how was the week, and I try to put notes on things that I accomplish. I try to do like daily, small daily wins every day. So I know that I'm progressing. I know that like a couple of those things that I was committed to do on the week are being done. I think that's important. I know like priorities change, especially when we're working with people that are like bringing new ideas to the table every single day and trying to brainstorm new ways of doing things. And I work with a lot of these type of people in my day-to-day, which is amazing for everyone, but it can also shift priorities quite often. Right? Sometimes I have one priority in the morning, another one in the afternoon, and another one by the end of the day. So I try to organize my calendar to make sure that I'm delivering all those things. And every Friday I review that. Monday morning, I spend like at least half an hour in the morning with my coffee to like review my whole agenda, to see which kind of meetings I need to join because it's a must, it's very important, which are the meetings that probably I'm not the most relevant person to be in that meeting, and try to bring someone else that can replace me in that meeting. And I think the concept of daily wins, it's very important for me. I need to start my day thinking, okay, I'm going to do this. If I do half of it, at least I started, at least like I know I progress, but I try to finish that specific task, because then I can go home, I can go to bed and say, okay, I finished that, I can start something else, you know. That's what I try to do, especially on these moments that are a bit weird, that you're just like in the same environment for like 24 hours and there's nothing you can do. And it's not easy. But I think if you have a very good organization, if you think like day by day, we can pass through this pretty well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think you're right in terms of, same as Hugo, time management is a big thing, organising your time. And you also brought up a really great point around, you don't have to be in every single meeting. Work out which ones you actually do need to be a part, because otherwise you get what George was talking about around being like in Zoom calls all day, every day, and you get this kind of zoomed out, burnout kind of thing. You're just like, I'm sick of Zoom. I just want to not be on it. And it's okay to say no to some meetings if you know that it's not really relevant, or that you could perhaps catch up on it afterwards if you need to just take that time out and to kind of refocus and do what you need to do. Good. Okay, so that brings us up to kind of the final question that I want to put to the panelists today. And then if there's any questions, guys, just pop them in the chat box and we'll try and take a couple of questions at the end. But I think we've talked a lot around kind of the big values and the big leadership mindsets that you need to have. And you guys have really kind of, the key ones for me that I've noticed from this discussion are, you've talked a lot about honesty and being open and transparent and having really clear communication as well, decisiveness as well, and kind of knowing what it is you're trying to achieve and getting that across to your team. And looking at strengths of your team was a big one that we've talked about today as well. So how to unlock the potential, how to identify what's good. But I think, again, sort of drawing back to that piece around vulnerabilities, it's important, like we said, that we're constantly reflecting on who we are as leaders and what we do and how we manage our people. And being able to kind of take that self-reflection means identifying your own strengths and weaknesses as well. So I want to put a question to you guys and leave that as kind of a final note. What would you say in your time as a people leader has been your biggest faux pas, and what have you learned from it? What did that teach you about you as a leader? So I'm going to throw it over to Hugo first. So Hugo, do you want to kick us off with that?
Okay. So I'm thinking about something that is applicable to the circumstances we are living now. And it will touch many points of our conversation from Bruno and George as well. I work from home, I mentioned this before, for almost a year and a half. And one of the most important things, and I work with teams across the world, from Asia to the US to Europe, to South America, even from here, from London. And one of the major mistakes I've made is that people, when we are working remotely, we have different perception of things. It's different, right? When you don't interact with people face to face, you don't feel the emotional side of people. The culture, the yes for someone in Asia is not the same as the yes for a Latino like me and Bruno. The being straightforward is not the same for a Portuguese like for a Brit. It's not, right? For me, straightforward is a different level of straightforward and direct and go straight to the point. So one of the biggest mistakes I made in a huge project, and that I was the central piece in terms of project management with different teams across the world, from BI to tech to business to loyalty and incentives, was to believe that all the team was aligned just with phone calls. So, and it wasn't, right? When you have someone in some countries saying, yeah, I can do it, I will do it. And it's not written like Bruno said, it's just in a phone call. They'll say, yes, I took notes, I will do it like you're saying. And it's what was not organized. And even more important, to see people in video, I think is really important in strategic meetings. You can see how people are taking it, and you can see beyond the basic go and do this particular line of text, and reinforce the message through different layers, a face-to-face meeting like we are doing now, let's call it face-to-face, and then send a follow-up email with the list of tasks and responsibilities, and then be on top of it regularly, is more important than ever. Because if you work with someone on your side, it's easy to have a look and to see, what are you working on? Are you getting along? With this, no, you have a task and you don't see people, you don't interact with people, and then you lose 1 week until to the next checkpoint. So you need to keep this regular pace of communication with small things, and be aware that people, yes, are different from culture to culture.
Yeah, I think that's a good lesson to learn, and you're right, you are very different in being straightforward, so it definitely comes across, but you're right, acknowledging that piece is really important. Okay, so George, you're up next. What's your biggest faux pas, and what did you learn from it?
I put this question out to my last team, my team in OVO, and I asked them to give me some ideas of my biggest faux pas. I thought that would be quite fun. It led to half an hour of hilarity on WhatsApp on Friday night, but nothing that I'm gonna repeat. And most of it was where they decided to have a go at each other. So that was quite fun. But the one that I'll share with you is I made some changes in my team based on I was having a discussion with the team and suggesting some ideas of how we could restructure and change what we were doing, and one person in the team was going, yeah, that'd be really great, and I just took that to mean that everybody would think that was really great, and actually they didn't all think it was, and I just listened to the loudest voice and the person that I thought was a bit of a mouthpiece for the team, but they clearly had, and also it backed up my thinking. So, it was like, oh, well, they're in support of what I think. And so therefore everybody else is probably in support too. Turns out it wasn't, and it was a bit of a car crash. So we had a couple of weeks of uncomfortable kind of working until I had one-to-ones with everybody, managed to get the truth out of everyone separately, and learned a very big lesson that just because one person with a loud voice is in support of the thing that you think, that's probably doesn't mean that everybody is.
That makes absolute sense, and you're very brave asking for that brutal honesty as well. Okay, so over to you, Bruno. What's kind of your biggest faux pas and lesson?
I had a big one a couple of years ago, probably 6-7 years ago. I had a team of around like 20 people, and I was hiring someone to do a very operational, like manual task job. And but I was looking for someone that could potentially automate the whole process, but that was not very clear in the beginning for that person. So it took me like 3 or 4 months to actually hire someone. And when I hired like a super smart guy. I was super proud of it. I brought everyone to lunch with him like in the first day. I communicate like through email to everyone. I was like super happy that I found someone that was going to fix my issue. But that was not very clear to him, and not clear in the recruiting process as well. So his first job, in his first day, basically after this whole like party thing and like announcing him to everyone, he spent like 4 or 5 hours doing what he was supposed to do, doing all these manual tasks and learning from the best one in the team. And like a lot of people came to me and say, mate, are you sure that person is going to last? Because he's very smart, his profile is completely different, and this is very, very manual. So I don't think he's going to last very long. And I was trying like to make a buzz and guarantee that he was happy. Long story short, the next day he didn't appear back in the office. And like 2 days later, he didn't appear again. And then I called him, he was not getting on the phone. And I said, what is happening? And then like a week later, he called me and said, Bruno, I'm not coming back. You were not like honest with me. And I said, how come I was not honest? Yeah, like you recruited me for something that was not exactly what happened. Then I had to put everyone together in the team and all the leaders and everyone say, yeah, it didn't work. I need 3 more months to hire someone else. So it made me learn a lot about like how to recruit and how to be clear when you're like creating like a job spec, but was very like weird. And if like I felt like, oh my God, I just wasted like 4 months and now I have to redo everything again.
Yeah. I can imagine that's horrible. You do, I mean, the first piece, the onboarding piece and getting the right people into the right roles is so crucial to a successful team. So yeah, lesson learned, like you said. Good. Okay, so we're coming to the end now, so I'm going to just wrap up. I just want to share a couple of resources with you guys as well, for those of you on the call. So just a few things. Today we'll be launching the Leadership Lounge LinkedIn Learning Collection. So that'll be live this evening. I'll send that out to all managers anyway, but basically it's just short courses that just go into a bit more depth about the topics we talk about in these episodes. So every week we'll keep adding to that collection as well if you're interested. There's a really good blog called Leadership Now, which talks about different leadership skills and a lot around leadership mindsets actually. And today actually there's a new Masters of Scale podcast. So if you haven't listened to the series, it's Reid Hoffman that hosts it. And he talks to different owners of big scale-up businesses around different topics. There's about 70 episodes on this. There's quite a few, but the latest one is crisis leadership, and it talks a lot about this kind of mindset and what we need to consider in these times and things like that. So it's worth a listen. Just to recap, next week's episode will be driving productivity from afar. So it'll be Hina, Steve, and Bev. I'll send out the link later today as well with the recording from this session. So if you are interested, please register and come along. It should be a really good discussion. But I just want to take this opportunity to thank our panelists today. You've done an awesome job, shared some great stories, been very brutally honest about your faux pas. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope everyone listening's enjoyed it. And thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.